Jo, tak si každý pak vezme židli, já už to nedobu. Ale sedneme si. Já si myslím, že to je takový jo, tak asi dohodnu.
Dobrý večer, je mi ctí vás přivítat na další přednášce z cyklu Co je architektura, který pořádáme tady na fakultě stavební na katedře architektury. Chtěla bych poprosit pana Mikuláše Bulce, aby řekl pár úvodních vět.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome here in Prague. Thank you very much for coming. Let me introduce Mr. Ian Bogle, head of the Bogle Architects, whose offices are located in London, Prague, Hong Kong, and where else? And as I was just noticed, Ian is Scottish, not English. So, and I think that he will tell you more. We have an hour and a half for his lecture, including your questions. So thank you for coming, thank you for your time, and this is your lecture.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Dobry wieczór. This is forward, yeah. So this is just a little journey across the planet, really, which we've been doing over the last 10 years or so. This is our studio in Prague, very revolutionary. And one of the interesting things that I love about architecture is that if you look at this photo carefully, it was taken a few years ago, granted, there are 40 people in the picture. There are exactly 20 female and exactly 20 male. So it's incredibly diverse, and I think that's great for the profession. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in Bogota, and then go across the country, the world, and I'm going to finish up in Singapore, not Beijing, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. So starting off in Colombia, is anybody? No? Fascinating place. It is quite interesting, and my wife and I were watching this program. We got the invitation to come to Colombia, and we thought twice about it, but we went anyway, and it was good fun. And I quite like this photograph as well, which I took because my name is Bogle, so I thought I love a dog, that's quite nice. And the interesting thing about Bogota is that it's on the equator. So it has a very, very stable climate. It's the same weather every single day. So every day you get up, it's like 9, 10 degrees, probably raining. But then by lunchtime, it sun's out, it's 21 degrees, and you get these beautiful sunsets every single day. So it's a very, very stable environment in that respect. So we did a competition back in 2017 or 18, as it was, and we won it. We beat a few American architects, which was quite good fun. And the reason we won was because we did something that was slightly different. But the parameters for the building had already been set by local codes, just like you have codes here. The local codes, particularly the daylight requirements, define the envelope or the massing of this building and what we could actually do. So that was fairly set from the beginning. And so this was our competition entry, which was a bit green. And one of the recurring themes you see in our designs is we use timber a lot. We use timber alive, and we use it dead, because it's a very sustainable material. So we use as much greenery as we possibly can when we're designing our buildings. And this was for a father and son development company. So we had constant battles with the father, who didn't want any greenery on the building, and the son, who wanted loads of greenery on the building. So the constant battle, and we'll see where we ended up. But just to show how we work internationally, we always have a local team. So here in Prague, we do everything because we have a Prague company. In London, we do everything because we have a London company. But elsewhere internationally, we always have a collaborating firm of architects. And the way that that works is that we generally do, if you break it down into 4 areas of design: concept, schematic, detail, construction. We'll do concept, schematic, and probably 50% of detail, and then the local guys will take it from there. They'll work with the contractors. We'll then have a kind of design guardian role to make sure that the detail design and the construction design is to what we've basically sold to our clients. So that's an important distinction. But in terms of the envelope we were given, we were trying to come up with something that kind of humanised this design. So we've got the notion of, legs, body, head. So we tried to make that work, and also being residential, external space is a key requirement of any residential scheme. So we had to get these balconies onto the scheme as much as possible. But the main element of this design for us was the facade, and that's why we kind of won the competition. Because the prevailing architecture in the area is red brick, as you can see from the earlier photographs, and you can see from here, everything is red brick. So we just made one simple distinction. We said, let's not use brick, let's use something else. So we used the stone, and in that respect, it made the building look different to all the other ones, but it wasn't such a departure from all the other buildings, so it was using the same kind of colours, but the reflections and the way that the building actually looks was completely different. So these are some CGIs. We've got our own CGI team down in Revolutionary to do all these. That's the CGI, and that's the real thing. Now the interesting thing for me, on this project was that this entire project was built during the pandemic. So I still have flights to go and see this building that I bought 3 years ago. So I've not actually seen it in person yet. But as you can see, it stands out amongst the other buildings in the area because it is just slightly different in the way that it's approached the architecture. It's a residential building, it's in a residential area, it's one of the more affluent areas of Bogota, and this is what we came up with. And we made the press. And the interesting thing is that the art that the client commissioned for the top, this is these words that say mind, love, distribute, and that was done by a Scottish artist who basically lived 100 yards from where I lived in London. He was exactly the same age as me. He went to Edinburgh School of Art, I went to Glasgow School of Art, and we were exactly the same age. And I'd never met this guy. World's a strange place. So moving on, this is Casablanca, and you see there's a lot of recurring themes in this. My name is Bogle, so my nickname in school was Bogie, so this is quite an important one for us, Casablanca. Casablanca has a fairly level height throughout the entire place, apart from two buildings. One is the Great Mosque, and the other are these two towers. One's a hotel, one's an office building, which is owned by the king. So he's the guy that can break the rules. Very interesting urban structure to Casablanca. And our site is the little one, is this pointer? There's a little one here. And this came to us through an old friend of mine from Foster's, when I used to work at Foster's in London. And I spent 4 years of my life as a junior architect working on the Gherkin, Swiss Re. And this guy came to us and said, "You worked on the Gherkin, I want a diamond." So we said to him, "Okay, what's your budget?" He said, "X." And we said, "Right, I need to explain to you, the Gherkin is a double-skinned building. It's that on the outside, because that's the structure that holds the building up. It's like a barrel. It's called a diagonal structure. But on the inside, there's another wall, which is vertical, which has partitionable lines on it, so you can put a vertical partition up against the wall. You can't do that against this. It's very difficult. So we had to come up with a solution that would give this guy's diamond in a single skin, because his budget was only could only afford a single skin. So we come up with this notion. We've got to come up with some rationale for why we can have triangles on this building. So from another perspective, where this site sat, it's like at the intersection of all these diagonal lines in the urban structure. So we took the notion that we could wrap that over the structure of the building, and that would give us a reason for actually doing it. And then we thought, well, how do we get a pattern onto this building that still makes it work as a standard office building where you can put partitions up against the wall? And the notion we came up with here was we spoke to this guy's cladding contractor. So we went down to Casablanca, met the guy, and said, "On your standard curtain walling system, you have a mullion, you have two bits of glass, you have gasketry, and you have something holding it together so it doesn't fall off." Yes. How much can we tilt the glass on plan in your system that you will still warrant, you will still replace it, clean it, do whatever else needs to be done over the next 25 years? They said probably about 7 degrees. So we said, okay, let's do 5 degrees, which gives us a 10-degree differential system. We now have a solution to get the diamond. So what we'll do is on the planning grid, we'll put verticals so we can partition the space. But on the other ones, we'll put diagonals across, and we'll just tip them slightly so that we get this shimmering effect, and then we'll slide them vertically as well. This is a little paper model that I made myself, yeah, because I was trying to figure out how we were going to do this. So using all the little tricks that we have to actually make something happen. Which then gets given to the guys who are better at drawing than me, and then we come up with something like this, which actually gives this shimmering diamond effect using a single skin, warranted by a contractor. And the whole point of this was, just back at the beginning I mentioned the tall buildings. So what this client was trying to do was to try to get 2 extra floors of accommodation above this standard six floor pipeline that we had to work within. Unfortunately in architecture, not everything gets built. This one never made it. It might happen at some point. So moving further north, this is Porto, Portugal, and another fascinating place. And again, alcohol comes to the table again. This project was called Project Tvoří. That was its code name. And Tvoří is one of the famous ports of Portugal. And this was an old industrial site, which was actually a tannery, i.e. leather. So they made leather at this place 100 years ago. And our client bought it. And we again, like many projects, we did an architectural competition, which we won back in 2017. And this was for a mixed-use development of residential, student accommodation, and commercial offices. That's the old tannery building, which we are going to refurbish into some food and beverage. But again, similar to Bogota, and similar to here, there was already a thing called the loteamento, which is a parameter plan, basically, of what we could build, where we could build, and how tall we could build. And we did the competition based on these parameters that we had to work within. So they were very prescriptive in terms of where we could place buildings, building lines, heights, areas, etc. And that was our competition winning scheme. So we did the presentation, me and 2 other guys from the office did the presentation, and all down one side of the table were 5 or 6 clients from London, who were the main client. And on the other side of the table, there was 5 or 6 guys from Portugal who had set the loteamento and agreed it with the Câmara de Porto, basically the planning authority. And we did the presentation, and at the end of the presentation, the client went, brilliant, loved it, great presentation. What would you change? Sorry? What would you change? So I didn't think we could change anything because the parameters are fixed. He said, what would you change? And all the Portuguese advisors were saying, you can't change anything, you can't change anything. He said, Ian, what would you change? I said, well, that hotel in the top corner, up there, we don't need an agent to come and tell us that that hotel's never going to work on this site. It's just never going to work, it's in the wrong location, it's middle of the industrial area, it's never going to work. These townhouses in the middle, adjacent to the offices on the other side, they don't make any sense, because who'd want to live in them? And the residential, looking down on them, they're overlooked. Doesn't really work very well, does it? And the student accommodation at the back of the site should be at the front of the site, because that's where the student and the university is. And they went, draw it up. So we won the competition at the end of it. We then took a wee bit of time, reorganised it, and drew up this scheme, which looks completely different and looks just like this now. And the issue here, I'm not just going to talk about architecture, I'm going to talk to you about the reality of running a business as well. We won this in competition because the client knew that there was a better solution to what could be done within the loteamento, the parameter plan. And so we said, move all the student accommodation to the front of the site, get rid of those townhouses, build an office building so you create a little commercial quarter, and then build Porto's tallest residential building, so some family buildings and a residential building. And we drew it up, and the only thing we didn't change was the overall area of the development. So we drew it up, everybody ran the numbers, and basically it was about redesigning, using design skill to redesign the master plan, we added 15 million euros to the profit of the project, and we didn't make the buildings any bigger. So there's a lesson in how building economics actually works. And it's a beautiful project, it's on site at the moment, and one of the other things we were doing was again trying to introduce pockets of greenery in vertical spaces, to tie all the green spaces, both horizontally and vertically, together. And that's the final thing. The student accommodation building at the front there is actually on site at the moment, and we're just doing a wee bit of redesign again, because the commercial office buildings, nobody wants them. So we're looking at alternatives again. So again, projects evolve and develop as the market conditions change. And that's a picture from a year or so ago of the student accommodation building. I had to put in one from the UK, so I'm going to go to Oxford, and a project that I've been working on for about 15 years in my past life, and Bogle Architects, is the Oxford Science Park. We do a lot of science buildings. We do a lot of science buildings here at the Physics Institute. I'll show you one of them later. But this was a project which was a speculative office building that could also be a laboratory. So a laboratory-enabled office. That's the first little sketch that I did of the project. And we always make little models, because models are very, so when you came in here, there's loads of models, fantastic. I love that. We love making models. This is the CGI of the building. And the point of this one is slightly different, because in the UK, these are just CGI shots. We build everything out of steel. That may be strange for you guys, because everything here is built out of concrete. But in the United Kingdom, we use steel to build office buildings. Even the Gherkin, 41 stories, was all built with steel. And the reason for that is that it's lighter, it's quicker to build, and just in terms of the economics of how it works in the United Kingdom, we do these buildings in steel. So we use these castellated, what we call castellated beams, which are the beams with the holes in them, so we can run all the services through there. But the other thing here is the columns, standard I column, because it's a standard office building, and we want to make them lab enabled, so we can put wet laboratories in there, we hide down pipes in the columns, and then connect them up. It's as simple as that. So that makes the building go from not just being an office building to being a laboratory building as well. So from a tenanting perspective, the client's range of opportunity for future tenants is much wider, because it gives that flexibility. Very crisp, very clean, very simple building. Orientated east-west, so we get the shading. Again, timber, using timber internally in our buildings as much as we possibly can, and externally, occasionally. And that's the finished shot. Now the interesting thing of this might not mean too much for you, but this building was built completed 4 years ago, and was built for £176 a square foot. That might not mean a lot, but a standard building of this should cost £276 a square foot. And again, it's being intelligent about how you actually use materials, and how you actually size things appropriately to make them on-site, budgetable, so that buildings get built. Because so many buildings don't get built because of the fact that they're too expensive. Here we go, lovely Praha, but not Praha exactly. Now one of the things, I've been coming back to volunteer for 15 years, and I always stay in the same hotel. I stay in the Joseph Hotel, just around the corner from our office. And if you come often enough, you actually get your own pillowcase. So I have my own pillowcase that is put on any time I stay over at the Hotel Joseph, which I think is a nice touch. Really. This is a project, again, we won a competition. It's called Eli Beamlines. I don't know if any of you are going to have a look at it, but it's down in Dolny Bajani. It's a very, very big project. We won a competition a number of years ago, and it is probably, and still is, probably the most complicated building that I've certainly worked on, because so much goes on in this building. It's a laboratory, it is a laser research hall, it is an auditorium, it is a library, it is commercial office space, it is a number of different things in one building. But the fundamental issue of this building is that it doesn't move. All buildings move, yeah. We've all got joints in them that make them move, they expand, they contract. This one doesn't, because inside this building they fire the most powerful laser in the world. The most powerful laser in the world travels through space in this building, hitting off the mirrors, so it travels 1.5 kilometers within this building. The building is the size of a football pitch, so it's 100 meters, so this thing travels 1.5 kilometers within the building, going faster and bigger, and it hits the experiment, and it all happens in 1 billionth of a second, and the light from the laser is allowed to deflect that much, right, 0.5 of a micron over 1.5 kilometers. So you can imagine if this building moves, that 0.5 of a micron hitting the destination target, yeah, it's quite specific. So the building has to be very structurally sound. So we actually had 4 engineers working on this project. We had Arab in London writing the brief. We had an engineer here in the Czech Republic designing the brief. We had the Institute of Physics board structural engineer checking the design. And we had Arab again in London checking all the design to make sure that it was working with the brief. So 4 engineers, 4 structural engineers all working on this project. This was the competition winning entry, and the notion of this from an architectural perspective was that laser light that was in the building. We wanted to get some notion of what's actually happening in this building onto the front of the building so people could understand. So the way that the light works is that we hit the button and it flies through space and it goes through tubes, and these tubes are called accelerators, so they make the light go faster. And they're called oscillators, which makes it get bigger, so it's getting faster and bigger all the time. It's basically flying through air in between tubes, so the gap between these tubes when you look at the roof. So we wanted to do that on the canopy, on the roof, so it was kind of hit and miss. So there's a kind of notion of what's happening inside the building actually directly shown on the outside of the building. From a technology perspective, it's pretty straightforward. There's the public side of the building, which is called the public side, which is the offices and the multifunctional building, and then there's the technology at the back. The laser hall itself is actually underground because the concrete is glued to the floor, basically, so that it doesn't move. And then that's broken down into 4 component parts: laboratories, offices, and what we call the multifunctional building. Servicing from the back. And another interesting little story is that this building, because it's moving large component parts, it has a huge lift in it, and the lift is probably 10 to 10, yeah, so 100 square meters lift. So when I was on site, when I saw this thing, I was like, got to ask this guy, because the guy's building it on site. I said, is this the biggest lift you've ever done? He's like, no. I was like, is it the biggest one you've done in Prague? No. So there must be this massive lift somewhere in Prague that none of us know about. Must be somewhere. But that's the fun thing of talking to people on site. That's the good part. So this is the overall diagram of that canopy over the whole thing, amalgamating all the building together. But that's the cross section. So the view I showed of the canopy in the front is the view from the left-hand side here. But as you can see, all that structural stuff is going on in the main building. And the main building isn't actually connected physically to the other parts of the building, so that when some people, literally people are walking, it can affect the laser light. So it's very important that it's separated. That should just give you a bit of the scale and the complexity within the building itself. So it is the size of a football pitch, and that's a construction photo from a few years back of what it looks like. And again, here we wanted to look at the shading. We wanted to make sure that the building was as efficient as possible. And we designed it initially as a kind of open plan office building. Our client and the way that people work in these buildings in the Czech Republic, everybody had to have their own office. So luckily we had this barcode facade that we could move the windows around so that we could actually get the building to work as broken down offices internally. But the other thing we had in the office component, I don't think I've got a photograph of it, is we have these light wells in the middle of the office. So we organised all the kitchenettes and all the breakout spaces around there because nobody ever has an idea at their desk. I have all my ideas in the shower in the morning, but everybody has ideas by collaborating, talking to each other. That's the way we work as a business. We've always worked that way. I've always worked that way. It's so important that you talk to each other. and you actually share ideas and think about things. And not every design comes from me in the office, other people do design as well. The trick is to allow them to take ownership of it, so that people actually own projects, so that they actually can develop as architects and become more successful. So again, typical internally, again, very robust building in terms of its materiality, very simple because it's a government European funded building. And then you can't really see in this picture, but this is what's known as a fluke. Does everyone know what a fluke is in English? It's like a lucky mistake, right? And in this area that connects the multifunctional building to the office building, there's a window at the end that we put to let light into that part of the building. If you actually look carefully, right on axis, in the middle of the window, there's a church spire, right on here. So it's almost as if it was by design. It was not. It was a lucky mistake, which was good. And talking about lucky mistakes, the reason that the Gherkin has the structure like that is not because some bright engineer came up with the idea. It's because me and another guy called Jason, when we were little architects at Foster's, built this 2-metre high building of the Gherkin with a polyboard, and it had vertical atria in it. But we built it so badly, because I'm not very good at making models, as you can see from the one over there, it was twisting, so the whole building was racking, and these atriums were twisting. And the building physics engineer saw this and thought, actually, we can make this actually work better for the building. Because when we have the natural stack effect in atriums, a circular building on plan, like a square building, if it's positive here, wind flow, it's negative at the other side. So tiles get sucked off a building if they don't get blown off. It's the negative pull. On a circular building, it's actually on the 90 degree. So the negative is here, and the positives are actually there and there. So that negative draw, that's why the building twists. So you get that additional suction of the wind through the building. And that was a mistake, because we built this model really badly. And that's how things happen in architecture. Bratislava, so we're going a bit further east now, and we've got a number of projects down in Bratislava that we've completed and are still going. And this is a little sketch that I did back in the day about how we wanted this building to kind of try and communicate with the castle, but also heal a wound within this area of Bratislava and the urban fabric. And so that's the building there, that's the CGI of it that we did back in the day. This is the CGI here, so it's retail at ground floor, commercial offices above. And what we were trying to do was work within the codes that give the illusion of a fully glass building, but still comply with the local codes, which is the fire regulations, etc., spread between floors. So we introduced this glass band that gives the reflection on the outside, but deals with the technical issues that it has to deal with on the inside. And that's the facade, the finished facade, and that's the finished elevation. And the idea here was to try and break it in and work with the rhythm of the adjacent building, but give it that curvilinear feel so that it's actually a softer building, more feminine maybe, in an otherwise masculine area. And we also did the interior for this building. And one of the good things is that we occasionally make the press, which is quite good fun. We're going to talk about Moscow, maybe I shouldn't, but it's quite an important design for us. We did this project, finished 6 years ago, and this was called Snigiri Eco, and we wanted to make these buildings as green as possible. And this is one of my colleagues at the time drinking pure green. I don't know what it was, but that was that. This was a competition-winning entry where we had all the greenery on the building. And it was a very interesting meeting where we won the competition. We flew over to Moscow and we met the local architect. And again, another fact of life, if you like, about being an architect. We won the competition, and then the local architect came to us and sat me down in a meeting and spent 3 hours explaining to me and my colleague why everything we were proposing, these big glass windows, greenery on the building, etc., etc., would not work in Moscow. Just will not work. We don't do that here. We're on for 3 hours. And he said, get up, put his coat on. I said, Mark, just before you go. And then I spent 1 hour explaining to him why everything would work. And this was because we'd done all the research. It wasn't just a competition, what does it look like? We'd actually done all the research. We looked at stuff in Canada, we looked at stuff in Russia, all the extreme differential countries, 40 degrees in the summer, -40 in the winter, so climatically it's really challenging. But we've done all the research to make sure that we could actually do it. So after that, he kind of sheepishly got up and went out the meeting room, and the client turned around to me and went, that is exactly why we won the competition. Not because of the design, because you knew that we could actually deliver it. And that was the important thing about it, because obviously, like here, there's a lot of snow. But this was a luxury development, and one of the things that we wanted to look at was how can we get the notion of luxury onto the outside of the building. So we took this notion that this little image, this is what we sold to the client, was that there's only one person in this photograph. Yeah, it's exclusive, it's luxury, it's only theirs. And so we took the notion of this ripple effect. We got one of the guys in the office to write a code about how we could actually create this facade in GRC. We had these gentlemen down in Istanbul make us a mock-up of it to show how we could get that ripple effect actually onto the building. So we took it from idea to computer to actually printing the mold to create this wave effect on the facade. One of the disappointing things was that they never built it. They used good old clinker. Yeah, so we ended up using brick to actually do the building, but it's finished. It's there, and if anybody ever gets to Moscow, then that's what it looks like. Now this is a very interesting project. This is in Dubai. Have you been to Dubai? Yeah, pretty hot, isn't it? Yeah. I was in Dubai once when it was 59 degrees in the middle of summer. It's not bad. But it's actually in the winter months it gets to about 22, 24, so it's not too bad in the winter months we're down here. But climatically it's incredibly challenging, and we all said as a business that we wouldn't do anything in this region unless the client wanted to do something that was environmentally progressive and actually work with the climate rather than letting the climate work on the building. So this was part of a wider master plan down in the Sports City, and this was the original master plan that was done by an American architect, and our site was this little site here. But they're all good projects, that never happened, and the site moved over to here later on in the process. Now to make this more complicated for us, our client is an international school group called Cognita, based in the UK. But they were joining up with a 500-year-old school called the Royal Grammar School in Guildford, which is in the town 40 minutes drive outside of London. And the head teacher of this school, who was also going to be part of the team for the school in Dubai, wanted imagery or something about this 500-year-old school in his new contemporary school for 2,000 children. We were talking in his office, which is the shot here from his window, and we thought, there's a clue, we'll take that. These are these old leaded windows. To the design of the building itself, it's a complicated building because it's what we call a K-12, so it's from kindergarten all the way up to year 12 and everything in between. So it's quite a complicated building from an organisation point of view. So actually there's 3 entrances into the building, one for the juniors, one for the nursery kids, and one for the main entry into the school. Now, the other thing here is that there's an authority called the KHDA, which is the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, and they have this guidance that says everybody up to the age of 6 has to have their principal classroom on the ground floor. So the way that these schools work, there's always lots more children in the early years than there is in the sixth form. So there's like 30 in the class in the early years, 15 in the class in the sixth form. So the dynamics, the profile, there's lots more children in the early years. So that defined the size of this building, basically, because we had 24 classrooms all on the ground floor. Within that pink block and the blue block is the amenity building. So we came up with this notion of a street that we can actually communicate between the older children and the younger children. And this is a couple of my first sketches. But this is probably the most important one. Because what we said to the client was, if we're going to do this, we have to do it sustainably. So we come up with a solution where we have a building stepping out, really simple diagram, stepping out. And what it does is it means that during the academic year, sunlight never hits any of the windows. So what that means is that the energy load on the building is dropped drastically, the operation cost on the building is dropped drastically, and it's good for the planet, because we're basically doing something that's keeping the energy loads down. So to cool this building, we're doing it from a better starting point rather than the windows get blasted by the sun every day, and that actually makes it more economical as well. So these are some of the CGI views that we did to sell the notion to the client. And that's probably the final CGI. And then this is a construction shop. Similarly to Bogota, this entire building was built during the pandemic. So I was on site in October 19, and luckily I got back for the opening in September last year. These are a few of the old construction shots. That's the finished building. And this is where we took the notion of the old leaded windows from the headmaster's office, and we just thought, let's use that super scale and we'll put it on the roof and we'll make those leaded windows of the 500-year-old school in Guildford. We used them as the roof structure to actually enclose the atrium. Our original designs for this was actually the whole atrium would be open so that we could naturally ventilate the whole space until somebody pointed out a sandstorm to me, and being in a sandstorm, we decided it was a good idea to close the building, otherwise it would just be a desert inside. The other notion of this is, well, all the classrooms are on the edge, and all the servicing is in the middle, so the toilets and everything else are actually dedicated pods in the middle of the building. And the building actually steps out so that the older children are on the upper floor. It's got a much more open expression and feeling, so it feels a wee bit more collegiate, so it feels like that transition to go to university. Whereas all we guys are down on the ground floor in a much more confined space with direct access to the external play space which young children need. This was the swimming pool, which is naturally ventilated. Believe it or not, the heat the swimming pool doesn't fly. And that's a completed shot. Now interestingly, I mentioned the gherkin earlier, but this is one of our facts, is that if you actually stood this building up on its end, it would actually be taller than the gherkin. It's actually 3 stories taller than the gherkin if you actually stood it up. So it's 200 metres long, this thing. It's a monster. Okay, Beijing. This was one of our first projects, and we won this in competition against some of the trendy Danish architects. And it was a competition organised by a company called Vanka, who are the largest residential developer in the world. But it was also with a UK company called the VRE. You've heard of BREEAM, probably, Building Research Establishment Energy Assessment Methodology. So they came together because Vanka wanted this to be China's first BREEAM Outstanding, which is the best result you can get, BREEAM Outstanding building in China. And where it sits is it sits in the Innovation Park, which is this bit here, and our building occupies this site at the very front of the building. And the notion, because everything in China is about a story, a narrative, everything has to have something emotionally attached to it. So we came up with this notion that our building would be the dragon at the front of the site, protecting the site. They loved it, everybody went for it. And we also took some clues from some of the other elements within China. Obviously this is the Great Wall. And so our initial modelling was to come up with this solution of this building that kind of protected the site, so it's kind of hugging into the natural landscape, but it's also got this metaphorical imagery of an undulating building. And these were some of the early sketches we did at the beginning. But then we had to get real because we had to build this building. And we came up with the notion of this sine wave, that actually we could build these three elements identically, but just position them slightly different on plan. So you get this undulation and this undulating roof structure, which allows natural lighting. Photovoltaics on the roof, because we wanted to generate energy, but the notion of this building that was part for the public, so that everybody could walk over it. It was a very green building. We did achieve the certificate of getting the outstanding building, but we also worked with Arab engineers in London to come up with a building that's incredibly efficient, and trying to come up with everything sensible from an energy perspective. So you can see, I won't go through the details, but you can see here that the building is almost 25% more efficient in terms of how it uses energy than the business use case, as we call it. Part of that was because it's incredibly efficient. Again, you can read what it's on the wall there, but efficiency was one of the key messages that we were trying to do on this building. Also looking at heating and cooling, and looking at the profile throughout the year of when we could naturally ventilate this building. So for 50% of the year, the entire building could be naturally ventilated. The other interesting thing about it as well is that there's no lights in it other than emergency lighting and task lighting. So it's an exhibition building, so the exhibits are lit. There's no general lighting in the building at all, again to keep those loads massively down. It's all done with natural light. And another little interesting thing here was how we did the facade. And this whole building was supposed to be like a demonstration building for people to understand what buildings of the future should actually be doing in terms of energy efficiency, etc. And this was done 10 years ago, so way ahead of its time. And we came up with this idea of using these plastic water bottles in the facade. I don't know if you can see on the image there. You can see where you've got clear glazing, and then you can see where we've got this opaque glazing. And within that opaque glazing, we developed a system with a facade engineering company in Hong Kong to come up with the notion of putting plastic water bottles as an instrument within the space, which we did, and it was all tested, it all worked. And the notion of that was to look at reusing materials. I wouldn't suggest you do that in every building, but the whole point of this building was a demonstration building to try and make sure that everybody's thinking about what we should be doing, not just doing business as usual case. That was the whole point of this building. It's something that we've done on every single project since we looked at that project. We question everything. It's so important to actually question what we're doing, why we're doing it, which is maybe even more important these days, and looking at actually doing more or less. I think somebody more famous than me said that, but that's what we're trying to do. So this is Vietnam. This is another school. In a very interesting place. Food's fantastic. I love it. But everything is these tall, simple structures that pervade the entire city. It's on the River Saigon. This is a view looking towards our site. And again, this was a very compact scheme that we had to do for a senior school in an old military part of the site, with the Saigon River to the west. And again, we came up with a very simple notion of the street. And this is an interesting perspective from an educational perspective. This is for older children, so this is senior school. But we put all the classrooms along one side, and then all the bigger spaces, the lecture theatre, the swimming pool, kitchen, gymnasiums, etc., on the other side of the street, which is effectively 6 metres wide. And the notion of that was that it's as important to learn outside the classroom as it is inside the classroom. And it was actually to give these breakout spaces for smaller groups, rather than 22 children in a classroom, smaller groups breaking down. And they all sit on these little wheelie seats with a desk, and they fly around all over this corridor, doing little individual pieces of work on 5 floors of the actual school. And the notion on that was that it actually increases the capacity of the school as well. So rather than being a 900 people school, because of the way that they actually learn, and the way that people are educated within the building, so the building is facilitating the education, it actually creates more people within the building. And being a private school, that's a good thing for the people who own the school. So this is some little diagrams that show how it sits within this residential area. There's a lot of things going on here in terms of schools. They're little mini villages because they do so many different things, so they're very complex in how they actually operate. I won't go through all the details, but this is some of the little diagrams. This is a cross-section or a long section through the building. And again, what we were trying to do here is make sure that sunlight isn't penetrating into the classrooms themselves. So all the windows are on the side, and the walls, which I'll show you in an image in a minute, are all blank, because the sun's always above your head, because it's almost equatorial in this location. So you can see there, this is one of the CGI views with the greenery in these little pockets, and all the light comes in obliquely from the side rather than on the main facade. Some CGIs, that's the real thing. Again, greenery as much as possible. Biophilia is a major thing in education as well. It's also in all our lives. It makes us feel better. That's been proven. And as you see here, every square metre is being used to the football pitch on the roof, which costs our structural engineers some headaches, but we got there in the end. And this is how that building sits in context. So it's a very large building. It tries to look at the rhythm of how all these little buildings work. So it's trying to work with the texture of architecture as well as all the other things it's trying to do in terms of the building itself. So this is my last project, and while Eli, extremely light infrastructure of beam lines, down in Dolman Vijay was the most complicated project. This is probably the most interesting project that we've worked on. This is a kindergarten in Singapore for 2,500 children, aged. So think about that. 2,500 children in a kindergarten up to the age of 6. How do we make it feel small? So bloody hell. Right? There was a lot of wine in this project. But we took this all the way back to first principles because we did research, and the largest kindergarten we could find was just outside Tokyo, which was 500 children. So this thing is 5 times the capacity. In Singapore, we need to go back to first principles. No one has ever done this before. So that's why this was probably the most interesting project we worked on, because there was no rule book. We couldn't go to the book of architecture and go, how do we design a 2,500 people kindergarten? It's not there, it's not in Neufer or whatever we call it. It doesn't exist, so there was no rule book. So we had to invent this school. So we took it all the way back and we started working with an early years consultant. So what is a kindergarten? Well, classroom, and it's external play space. That's it. That's simple. So what we did is we took that notion of that. This is the DNA. This is the DNA of the building. Classroom, play space, and WCs when we need them. 400 of the children don't use the bathroom yet. Think about that. Another challenge for this building. So we took the notion of this block and this DNA and started playing with it. And we came down to what we call the cluster. So this is the cluster. So this is one kindergarten, effectively, where we have all the classrooms around the central heart with green space everywhere on the building. So green space, these green dots there are about 30 square metres, just to give you an idea of scale. So that was what we call the cluster, which is an arrangement of 4 classrooms around what lovingly became known as the peanut, which is this little thing in the middle, which houses all the little bits and pieces that little kiddies actually need. And we thought, let's make that playful, and we'll actually look at how we have to actually organise these things in a slightly different way on different floors. Break that down into modules, and how we can actually redistribute that across the building. But what we were trying to do, again, you can see it's a recurring theme in our designs, was trying to shade as much of the building as we possibly could. So again, Singapore, like Bogota, is equatorial. But rather than it being 9 degrees in the morning and 21 degrees in the afternoon every day of the year, it's 28 to 32 degrees every day of the year. The sun's always above you because it's equatorial. And It rains pretty much every day as well in Singapore, so it's an incredibly difficult climate to work with as well, when it rains. I'm from Glasgow, I've seen rain. It normally comes horizontally, but if it rains in Singapore, it fucking rains. So this was my first little sketch that I did of this building, of how we've got these notions of these drawers and boxes all interacting with each other. And then we made models. We made loads of models on this building at different scales and at different times, because we had to sell this idea to the client. This client is about to spend 100 million euros on a building that's never been done before. Doesn't know if it's going to work. So we built these models. The building finally got built. But this is just explain a wee bit of what we had to do here. So the site, this is an existing school called the Australian International School, and the site is this bit here. The main water line that feeds Singapore from Malaysia runs right past the site. Another interesting thing that if we stuck a hole in there, we just wipe out the whole water from the entire Singapore. So that was an earnest thing. And then just to make it even more complicated for us, our client said, well, it's not actually one school, it's two schools. It's an Australian school and it's an American school. So that made it even more complicated because the Americans and the Australians have a completely different teaching methodology. One has what we call open methodology, which is where 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds will all mingle together, whereas the American system is what we call the closed system, and every classroom has its own classroom, so they don't interact. So we had to design that flexibility into the building as well. And the way that the numbers worked, we ended up with a number of classrooms on the Australian side and a number of classrooms on the American side. We looked at how we could, through timetabling, share some of the common resources on the building. So swimming pool, gymnasium, library, etc., etc. So there's in the middle between the two schools is this block of amenity space. That's what it looks like in a swimming pool. This is a bespoke swimming pool as well. So most swimming pools have a deep end and a shallow end. This is a deep side and a shallow side, so it goes the other way. So the slope goes in cross section rather than the long section. And the reason for that is that you can teach more children in one sitting, because you've got a much longer side where people are above water level rather than the short end. So everything in this building was challenging, thinking about how things actually work. And then, kind of counterintuitively, we put the youngest children at the top. You know, the youngest children at the top, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does. Because this building is all about logistics. It's about how do you move people. And these wee guys, age 0 to 2, they can't walk. So you move them once, you get them in the morning, you take them up to the top floor, you leave them there, and then you take them back down again. Whereas the older children, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, they can't walk, so they can walk up a flight of stairs. So the older children are at the lower level, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it actually works. We also had communal play areas, as well as the classroom play areas, which are learning. We had communal play areas as well. We didn't design the ship, but that's really popular here. And then, as I said, sun is always above you in Singapore. So on the east and the west sides, we have as much greenery as we possibly can. But again, I said it rains a lot, so those external play spaces, we have to cover them. We cover them in this ETFE roof, which looks a bit like that. Again, logistics, car parking, bus drop-off. Word of advice when you get into professional career: never start a meeting talking about traffic. Never. You'll never get on to anything else, because people just love talking about traffic every time. So put it item 9 on the agenda, not item 1. Just a bit of advice. 5, 10 years from now, you'll be thinking, oh, can I say that? So this is the drop-off, because we've been talking about drop-offs, but that's that. But again, logistics, there's a massive issue on this building. How do we actually collate all these children, all these 2,500 children, over a half-hour period, and distribute them around the building? So we came up with this notion of a mustering area. So we would muster a cluster. There was lots of words that we came up with on this, which was a kind of holding area where we could keep children until we had a lift full of children, and then we'd move them. So we had these holding areas till the beginning of the day and the end of the day. But what would we do with those during the middle of the day? So this area became the specialist classroom areas, so music, art, other bits and pieces. And again, one of the other things that we put in this building, because remember it's for wee guys, is have windows in the classrooms and all around that are the right height, so that people can actually see into the classrooms. That's why I have these interesting ones. The other point with this was I mentioned is how do we actually move people in this building? So we actually have 10 lifts in this kindergarten, which is incredible for a school. Most schools have one lift. This is the fun part. This is what clients look like. Okay? These are the guys that are about to spend 100 million euros on something that's never been done before. You can see why they look worried. Okay? So this is me explaining how this building would work. So we built this model, and we just built it at a polygon so we could explain to people how this works. Show how every floor works, how the areas broke down, how the classrooms work, how the cores would work, how the overall building might look, and how we do mechanics. And this is a model which is probably the size of that table. So we were in Singapore, 1 month into the project. We've presented a version of this building to the client, and as it just happened, they had their early years consultant doing a bit of research on the existing facility next door. They had 100 children in it. And they got Rosie, who's a good friend of mine now, who's 65 years old and been in early years education all her life. They got her into the room and they said, Rosie, this is a kindergarten for 2,500 children. 2 questions. What do you think the children will think about it? More importantly, what do you think the parents will think about it? And Rosie took off her glasses, walked around the model, put them back on again, not really showing any expression, and these guys are getting really nervous because they're thinking, what should we say, what should we say, what should we say? And after about 2 minutes of walking around the model, she looks at them and goes, I think they both love it. And on the strength of that, these guys went, right, let's build it. One 65-year-old woman from Dorset came in and said, I think we both love it. And that's it. That's how decisions are made sometimes. So this is a cross-section to the largest kindergarten in the world. That scares the living daylights out of me, actually. It's super complicated. This is how it actually works on plan. I won't go into the detail. But you can see how the clusters actually work and how the interrelations. You have to look at fire regulations, how to get children out of the building, as well as getting them into the building. So incredibly complicated logistical process that we went through. The other interesting thing about this building as well is that it broke the mold in terms of how everything in Singapore has to be air conditioned. You just can't live in buildings without it. So we've come up with a solution of using what's known as a displacement system. So rather than the air conditioning pushing air down from above, it's actually bringing it in from below. You think, what's so good about that? Well, 2 reasons. One, it's more environmentally friendly, because when we put the air in at this temperature here, we put it in at 18 degrees, so the temp gets to here is 21 to 22 degrees. You put it in from above, you have to put it in 14 degrees to get it down to 21 degrees at this level. What's that? 4 degrees of difference in terms of what's the outside air temperature as to what you're trying to put it in at. So it saves 4 degrees of energy all year round, which means it's a much more efficient system. The other thing is because it's fresh air continually coming up, it's actually healthier. So this was all done pre-COVID, but it's actually a healthier system for the children. And the client didn't take the decision because of the environmental issues, they took the decision because of the health issues, because they thought that's more important for children. Children safeguarding health is super important. So these are some of the images of what it actually looks like in real life. That's a CGI, that was a CGI. These are some more CGIs. And the notion here, this is the approach shot. So what we were trying to do with this building as well was, as I mentioned at the very beginning, how do we make it feel small? So we played it picturesque so that the mass of the building is at the rear of the site. So when you approach it, it looks like a 2-story building. It's actually an 8-story building at the back. And again, more CGIs. And then just getting a feel for the scale of that building. This is the site under construction. That's one of the cores. And then that's the completed building. These photographs are from 5 years ago. As you can see, it's just covered in greenery because it rains all the time and it's very hot, so the plants just grow. It's fantastic. And maybe one of the more important ones that I want to leave you with, this is what architecture is actually about. It's about shelter, and it's about making the world a better place. That's what we all should be doing. Using greenery as much as possible because it makes us feel better. And that's that.
So thank you for the lecture. It was very inspirative for us. And I want to ask if anyone has some questions from auditorium. Můžete se zeptat česky, já to zkusím přeložit.
It's kind of like a stupid question, but how do you transport such big models when you said it's big as the table, so
In a box. So we break them down into component parts, turn them upside down, interlock them, cover them with foam board, and pad them all out, and then put them into the smallest box that we think we can get it into. And then we go to the airport, then we take it to outside luggage, goes in there, and then we wait for it to the other side. And then we reassemble it, so it's always full of scaffolds, tape, glue, and everything else, because they generally get broken during transit. So that's the fun part of rebuilding them when we get to the other end.
So you build it at the offices, and then you bring it to the presentation to other countries.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Because it's very important to make models, and we advocate making models as much as possible. Because sometimes clients can't read drawings, but they can understand models, and that's why we make them all the time. And make them so that we can take them apart, put them together again, so we can explain to people how different parts work, rather than just, do you like it? Doesn't work like that.
Okay, another question? Okay, I have one. So, how many projects do you have from competitions, and how many projects do you have from clients who are directly asking for it?
Probably 50-50, I would say. When we do competitions, we either win them or come second, which is sometimes very disappointing. And then the rest of the time, once we might have done a competition with the client, and then they like us, and then they give us more work. We don't bother doing competitions anymore, because of the way that we actually work. We're very much focused on actually delivering things that actually work. Yeah, and that's what, if you don't do that for clients, one, they never come back again. You know, and people say, well, don't go to them because you're not going to get the building that you actually want. But our job is to facilitate the process, because it's the client's building, it's not our building. You know, we're just here to make it work and make it look nice.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned repeatedly research, which you do before your complicated designs. What exactly does it mean? Do you travel with your team to the sites, to the environment, to learn about the environment, or do you really do some specific research within your office, within the institutions? Let me just explain why I ask, because my experience in this country is that usually you win competition for a public commission, and there are only two aspects which the client has: the money and time. So we never have enough time to do a research.
Yeah. The answer to that is two things. One is yes, we always go to visit the site. Very important. And I'll tell you another story. In my past life, one of my fellow directors in another business that I work with did this residential scheme on a hill. You finished it. Did this residential scheme on a hill. And went to present it to the client. And about 15 minutes into the presentation, the client puts his hand up and goes, "I've got to stop you first." He said, "Thanks very much. This is a fantastic presentation. You know, the designs are fantastic. We really love it. But there's one question. Have you been to the site?" And I went, "I don't know what happened." He said, "Yeah, because had you been to the site, you would have realised that it wasn't a hill, it's actually a quarry." So the guys who made the model had read the contours the wrong way around and built a hill rather than a quarry. True story. Yeah? So one, always go to see the site. Now, okay, with Google Earth and everything else now, you know, back in the day we didn't, but you can do all that stuff. You can do so much stuff remotely now. We've all had to do stuff remotely over the last 2.5 years because of the obvious facts. But always go to look at the site. Always go and look at buildings that are probably of a similar type that we're trying to do within that area. So if we're doing school, we'll look at schools. If we're doing an office, we'll look at offices, residential, etc., etc., etc. So we do that. But we also use a thing called Google, because that is the fantastic compendium of information across everything. So you can get everything on that. You just need to know the right questions to ask. But it's all about understanding the climate. But once it's not just about us, it's working with the engineers, because the engineers are so important in terms of understanding how the building is actually going to work. You know, and working with talented engineers who understand, you know, how boundaries can be pushed. You know, like the school in Singapore. It's the first building in Singapore to use displacement air. It's not even the first school, it's the first building in Singapore to actually use it. Because we had all the knowledge from the UK, we've used it in buildings in the UK. Foster's office in Battersea, it's got a displacement system, so it's been around for years, so we had all the tried and tested information on it. So we go and explain something new to people who've never done that before. You're actually doing it with some harmony. You have the facts that show that it actually can work. Then you've still got to persuade people to actually do it. Yeah. But it's a combination of visiting the site and the surroundings, and also what we can find working with the team.
Is there any question? Yeah, again, okay.
What was the final thing that made you decide to switch from Foster's to being on your own? And how is it different from like being managed to manage something, someone? Yes.
It's called my daughter.
Excuse me?
My daughter.
Oh.
Yeah. So I had a baby. My wife and I had a child 20 years ago. And I looked at my paycheck and I looked at our birth certificate and they didn't add up. So I had to do something. It's as simple as that. So after 8 years at Foster's, I decided to actually get some more money to pay for my daughter. And that's why I made the leap. First to one other company, I was a director there, and then 10 years ago set up Bogle Architects. And what's the difference between being managed and managing? I think I mentioned at the beginning, we're a very collaborative practice because we do so much international work, we're working with other architects around the world. So as individuals, we're collaborative, so it's not really about telling people what to do, it's asking them what they think we should do. You know, it's a completely different approach. And it's the same with Foster. You know, the struggle there is very collaborative as well in terms of it's just much bigger. Yeah? And the jobs just float down to them. You know, well, we've gone so long. We lost the competition, but we came second to Foster's 18 months ago. We did a competition for a winery in Kent, on the east coast of the United Kingdom. And we were up against Foster's, Rogers and Gensler. And the client came to our office in Notting Hill and said, congratulations, you've down to the last two. We did the presentation, blah, blah, blah. The guy was in Monaco on the screen, the local guys were here. And then we got an email, a phone call a week later saying, sorry, you've been unsuccessful. And I said, well, can you tell me who won? He said, no. But I'll answer your questions. I said, okay. Did I work with him? Yes. And as it transpired, Mr. Foster himself did the actual presentation personally, which doesn't happen very often. So we were absolutely gutted in the office. You know, we were like really depressed for about a week. And you know, it was very demoralising for young architects as well. Very demoralising for me, but also, you know, when you actually look at it, you put it in perspective, and you think, actually, we've just come second to possibly the greatest architect on the planet at the moment. It's not so bad. You know, and then the client gave us another job in the south of France, so it wasn't too bad in the end after all. So, thank you.
When you present your clients, how long does the presentation usually take?
Probably an hour.
Thank you.
Why is it so long?
30 minutes of presentation, 30 minutes of discussion, generally speaking.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, what was the game changer project for you? What's like open world, the door to the world for you?
Probably Eli, the laser building in Dalbajani, I would say. That was probably the game changer.
And why?
Just because it was so complicated, and because we managed to deliver it, people started taking it a lot more seriously. Yeah. Because it's incredibly challenging to set up your own business. It's not all rosy. The flying around the world isn't rosy. You know, if you try sitting in the economy seat for 13 hours in Singapore, that ain't fun. Yeah, so, and knowing that you've got to build a model when you get out the other side, but it's fun. It probably be like, a lot of it, and the more international work we do, the more international people come to us. So, over the last 10 years, we've worked in 27 countries. So it's not just these, there's a lot more that we've done. It's good. But architecture is a very transferable profession because of what we do. You know, as long as you've got people who can speak the language, understand the local issues, because you have to work collaboratively, because you know, if you do it, you come up with ideas, but the local guys are saying, well, you can't do that, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. We just started a project in Belgrade, and at the first meeting 2 weeks ago, the client would come up with this expression. There's nobody allowed in this room to say, you can't do that in Belgrade. That was at the first meeting. Yeah? So that the local architect can't say that. He's not allowed to say it in the meeting. He's got to think of another way to say it, but he's not allowed to say that. So it's again about challenging the boundaries, because otherwise, why are we there? You know? So that's what we do, why we do it.
Thank you very much.
So last question.
projects they held like per year?
It varies. It varies in scale. We probably do more from the Prague studio than we do from the London studio. We tend to do bigger projects in the London studio. We do big projects here as well, but there's a lot of smaller projects here as well. I don't know, probably at the moment 40 projects at the moment. Anyone's at different stages, you know, from competitions to on-site and everything in between.
And you manage them all? Like,
I don't manage them all, no. Victoria runs the business here.
yeah.
So, I just swan into this kind of stuff. So, no, yeah.
Thank you.
We do sometimes manage to do them all, yeah. But again, it's thinking cleverly about how you do things, and it's trying to do more with less people, and we'd rather employ better people than just have lots of people. And I think that's very important to actually do that, because we give people the opportunity. There's an expression, you get enough rope to hang yourself. You know, so that's how it works.
Thank you.
Do you have any message for students, or is there any information which you missed during your studies and now you will use it?
It's bloody hard work being an architect, and it's always your fault. So you've got to be pretty thick-skinned if you want to be an architect, because people are always going to tell you you're doing something wrong, and you've got to be confident enough. Not I mean, you've got to have the confidence to say, no, I believe in this, I'm going to do it. And if you've got confidence, everybody around you has confidence. When I moved to Foster's, I worked for a year with another company in Glasgow, and I just finished qualifying at Glasgow School of Art. And I walked into the office, it was in Glasgow, because they were doing a project in Glasgow, and that's why I was employed. I was basically the translator to translate Glaswegian for these guys who came up from London. And I walked into this room, and I was 25 at the time, okay? And there was 3 guys in this room, all sitting around the computers. One was 26, one was 27, the other one was 28. Yeah? And that was it. And then there was me, and when I was 25. The confidence in that room, building this 3,000-seat auditorium on the banks of the River Clyde, there were these 3 young guys doing it. Occasionally somebody came up from London, from Mothership. The confidence was just unbelievable. Just couldn't believe it, just these 3 guys just doing this. You know? And it's just the confidence that pervades through that business. And that's what we try to do here, is to give people the confidence to actually go out and do what I do, what Victoria does, what the other senior staff do, is actually grow, yeah? And just believe in yourself. Because everybody's going to continually tell you that you're wrong, and you continually lose competitions. And you've got to get up and go, that one wasn't meant for us, let's move on to the next one. Yeah, because it's incredibly demoralizing sometimes. You just got to tough. And be prepared to work, basically. You know, get the job done. And we're not saying to, you know, we're not in Foster's where everybody works from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. We're not like that. You know, sometimes you have to stay late because there's a deadline to hit. All students, you know that. The deadline is, you know, when you submit the thing, you've got to do it. So it's about leaving the right amount of time for thinking, and knowing how long it's going to take you to do what you actually need to do. But don't drift into that, because that's when it starts getting painful. If you take the thinking time into the doing time, you're fucked. Yeah, you got to know when to say stop. That's what we're doing. Yeah, excuse my language. I thought trying to be blunt about giving people advice.
So thank you very much for your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I hope you did.
Děkuji vám za pozornost. Jenom krátká informace. V tomto semestru připravujeme ještě jednu přednášku, myslím, že bude 10. listopadu, mám ještě 12.
2 přednášky.
2 přednášky, jenom jedné. Mladého architekta z Polska, zapomněl jsem jméno, a na příští semestr nám slíbila tedy paní architektka Viktorie Souček, že by možná pokračovala v přednášce o své architektuře a o tom, co dělá Bogle Architects. A máme rozjednou přednášku s jedním japonským architektem, který pracuje v Praze na ambasádě, že udělal přednášku o vývoji moderní japonské architektury, ale to všechno až příští semestr, prosím, sledujte Facebook, sledujte i pořádkovou, těším se, že se nám podaří to domluvit. And thank you so much. It was extremely inspiring and interesting, and hope to see you again in Prague.
Tak já jenom doplním, přednáška bude 10. listopadu, bude to polský architekt Robert Konečný. Přednáška bude v polštině, ale bude překládána do češtiny. A 31. listopadu budeme mít přednášku architektky Marie Davidové. Děkuji za pozornost.
Už to byla teď,